An innocent trip from Heiligenkreuz in the Tyrol to Innsbruck in the autumn of 1612 brought a shock to Adam Haselmayr, musician, theosopher, medical celebrity, and notary public to the Archduke Maximilian. On the orders of the Jesuit Inquisitor Hippolyte Guarinoni, Haselmayr was arrested and sentenced to slavery on the Mediterranean galleys. Why? During the previous March, Adam Haselmayr had published his answer to a manuscript called the Fama Fraternitatis, the fame of the fraternity. The Fama had been privately distributed to persons with, it was hoped, a sympathetic interest in the advancement of science and religion in a corrupt society. The Fama Fraternitatis announced the existence of a discreet fraternity founded in the late Middle Ages by a German nobleman, Brother C.R. Dissatisfied with monastic life, the youth had travelled to the east in search of wisdom. Finding himself welcomed as one long expected by the sages of Damcar in Arabia, he translated their masterpiece on the mathematical and magical universe into Latin. Frater C.R. observed how the savants shared their knowledge without jealousy, hypocrisy, or egoism. Longing to share his discoveries with Europe, Brother C.R. made his way home to Germany. But Brother C.R. found only hostility and indifference. The good folk of Europe, and especially Germany, had other things on their minds. The union of religion and science in a spiritual quest for the exact nature and truth of things visible and invisible was not one of them. So Frater C.R. established a fraternity of sympathetic brethren, the Fratres R.C., who met annually in secret in their House of the Holy Spirit to further a total reformation of knowledge. So why communicate now? In their Fama, the Fratres R.C. claimed to have been stirred by the discovery of Frater C.R.'s body, whole and unconsumed, in an extraordinary vault in Gallia Narbonensis, that is to say, in Languedoc in the south of France. Constructed as a compendium of the universe, an inscription on the vault's door accurately predicted the time, 120 years, between burial and discovery. The Fama lays out the new scene, a new promise for mankind.
Seeing the only wise and merciful God in these latter days hath poured out so richly his mercy and goodness to mankind, whereby we do attain more and more to the perfect knowledge of his Son, Jesus Christ, and of nature, and moreover hath raised men, imbued with great wisdom, who might partly renew and reduce all arts to perfection, so that finally man might thereby understand his own nobility and worth, and why he is called microcosmos, and how far his knowledge extendeth into nature.
Great advances in science testified to the fraternity's work. The brethren now wished to hear the sincere responses of all who wished to join. Judging from his printed response of March 1612, Adam Haselmayr was particularly moved by the Fama's consistency with the ideas of the greatest and most controversial medical doctor of the age. Paracelsus, who had died 70 years before, introduced chemistry to medicine, believed in the virtue of experiment, had more faith in the book of nature than received paper authority, got his hands dirty, and tirelessly fulminated against all those who could spout but could not cure. This is all well known. What is far less known is that Paracelsus, inspired by the Hermetic tradition, also wrote a great deal on the subject of religion. Kept secret in his lifetime, these volumes, and those added to them by his followers, would become time bombs after his death. Paracelsus held to a Gnostic cosmogony. Man was a microcosm of the universe, but the spirit that giveth life was generally trapped in gross matter. Paracelsus had no time for the Mauerkirche, the external church of stone, but believed in the church of spirit, the inner word. As his follower Haselmayr put it, God does not need bishops or professors to tell him where to go, what to do, or to whom he should speak. Paracelsus's own middle name, Theophrastus, means God speaker or God expounder, and he lived up to his name. Followers such as Haselmayr took it as the name for a new religion, which he called the Theophrastia Sancta, or religion of the two lights. The light of grace and the light of nature. Follow the divine signatures in nature, and a harmony invisible to the disharmonious mind would appear. Paracelsus prophesied a coming golden age of grace. The Magi were returning. What Haselmayr read in the Fama chimed in with the Paracelsian bell. In his enthusiastic Antwort of March 1612, he thanked the Brethren of the Rose Cross for their divine gift and Theophrastiam. He also outraged Jesuit Inquisitor Hippolyte Guarinoni when he declared the Rose Cross Brothers to be the real Society of Jesus. In Germany's Saxon Anhalt region stands a castle at a place called Plötzkau. In December 1611, the youngest of three princes of Anhalt, based at Schloss Plötzkau near Magdeburg, became the first known person to try to contact the Fratres RC. This man was Prince Augustus von Anhalt, a serious enthusiast of the alchemical quest. This we know thanks to the peerless work of Spanish scholar Carlos Gili. During the 1980s, Gili discovered correspondence sent by Prince Augustus to the Augsburg physician and alchemist Karl Wiedemann. I have taken the time to read and read again Herr Haselmayr's answer to the farmer. I have considered it, and in God's name taken it to heart, and found it to be an outstandingly good work, in which Herr Haselmayr has undertaken to promote the farmer, and to intimate that it should be published. Augustus, dedicated to transmutation, respected Wiedemann's alchemical skills. Between 1587 and 1588, Wiedemann had been secretary to British alchemist Edward Kelly in Prague. Kelly had also for a long time been the seer in the spiritual experiments of the world-famous British mathematician, astrologer, and natural scientist, Dr. John Dee. This is Dee's symbol for cosmic unity. For years, Karl Wiedemann had been collecting the red-hot theological writings of Paracelsus, as well as those of the so-called radical spiritual reformers. Men such as the Knight of Ossig in Silesia, Caspar Schwenkfeld, who was born to a life of conflict and rejection in 1489, and Valentin Weigel, whose name would be taken to describe the spiritual followers of Paracelsus, the so-called Weigelian heretics. These works of alchemico-spiritual Christosophy scandalized the closed worlds of all the proponents of authoritarian religion in the 16th century, whether Catholic or Protestant. They attempted to describe the way God and Christ actually operated in the cosmos and in the soul, or at least as much as was open to spiritually enlightened human understanding. Furthermore, Wiedemann shared Adam Haselmayr's understanding of the Theophrastia Sancta as being, in Carlos Gili's words, a sort of perpetual religion, which since the days of the apostles had been practiced in concealment until the time when the German Trismegistus, Paracelsus, began publicly to expound its meaning. In summer 1611, Wiedemann encouraged Prince Augustus von Anhalt to offer Haselmayr the task of assembling Theophrastian texts for the prince's secret printing press at Plötzkau. In December, Augustus received a New Year's present from Haselmayr, copies of both the Fama and his response to it. Reading it and rereading it, Augustus was deeply hooked. This is the room where Augustus's library used to be kept. It is said he liked to read in his little window seat. Perhaps this is where he first read the Fama Fraternitatis. In this letter, Augustus asked Karl Wiedemann how he might obtain the Fama's promised follow-up, the Confessio. Wiedemann knew the Fama had come from the house of one Tobias Hess in Tübingen, but inquiries yielded nothing. Back in the Tyrol in August 1612, Adam Haselmayr, keen to please Prince Augustus, tried another approach. In this letter, he requested permission from Archduke Maximilian of the Tyrol to go to Montpellier in Languedoc to search for the Fratres RC. Thanks to Jesuit Inquisitor Hippolyte Guarinoni, Haselmayr never reached Languedoc. For 5 terrible years he suffered in the galleys, with only John Dee's magical hieroglyph for company, until the last light. If there ever was a real Rosicrucian fraternity, the nearest one might get to it would be to understand the common and complementary elements of mind subsisting between the following 3 brilliant friends of Tübingen. Dr. Tobias Hess, born in 1568, the eldest of the 3, Christoph Bezold, who gained the chair of jurisprudence at Tübingen in 1610, and perhaps not only the youngest but the greatest of the 3, Johann Valentin Andreae, born in Herrenberg in 1586. To their amazingly fertile relationship, Bezold brought a powerful knowledge of medieval mysticism and of Hermetic philosophy. Hess brought a profound knowledge of theology, Paracelsian medicine, mathematics, astronomy, astrology, numerology, and of apocalyptic symbolism. Andreae brought forth from his Lutheran family background and dreamy childhood a genius soaked in classical literature, a dazzling knowledge of alchemical philosophy, and a full knowledge of the Renaissance Gnostic Platonism of Pico della Mirandola and of the infinite universe revealed by Giordano Bruno. Andreae was also deeply acquainted with the spiritual Christianity of Sebastian Frank, Schwenkfeld, Weigel, and Paracelsus. Andreae was also a highly gifted dramatist, an intellectual with a staggeringly explosive sense of humor. The Fama overflows with Andreae's wizened irony and pristine spirituality, while its soul breathes the air of the youthful idealist, crying out through a lugubrious allegory for a reform of the entire knowledge base of Western Europe. Andreae demands a place and people undivided by confessional differences, dedicated to pursuing the light of nature in the light of grace, on the cornerstone of the Christ who says, and is always saying, the truth will make you free. The trouble was that almost nobody knew that Andreae was the author. The text, as we have seen from the case of Augustus von Anhalt, was taken literally. After his committal to the galleys, Haselmayr's manuscripts, including a copy of the Fama, had been entrusted to the Theophrastian believer Benedictus Figulus, a man later described by Andreae as a globe-trotter and a charlatan. Subject to an arrest warrant at Freiburg, Figulus proceeded to globe-trot 150 miles north to Marburg in Hesse-Kassel. There he deposited Haselmayr's manuscripts at the home of Raphael Eglin, author of Fameusis Mundi and other works. Eglin was an alchemist patronized by the Landgrave Moritz von Hessen, based at Kassel. Kassel was the base of the printer Wilhelm Wessel. March 1614, Wessel printed the Fama Fraternitatis. The collection included Haselmayr's answer to the Fama, as well as an account of his fate at the hands of the Jesuits. Significantly, the publication also included the work The General Reformation of the Whole Wide World. This was a humorous extract from Traiano Boccalini's satirical News from Parnassus, hot from the liberal and politically threatened Venetian Republic. Its appearance ensured the Fama was immediately linked to an itinerary of global reformation. The greatest publicity stunt of all time had begun. This is Johann Valentin Andreae, a German satirist, poet, and theologian. Around the year 1610, he and his friends had a dream.
It was a dream. It was a dream they had. A community of knowledge, above time, across space. A dream. A scientific community of human interest, beyond the state, beyond the worldly church. A dream of the free, waiting for a better time, a better place. An eternal body, never existed, ever existing. Dream your way to membership, an imaginary world, from the past to the future.
RC live about Strasbourg, 7 miles from thence, in a monastery. This is a cipher note made by Hermetic philosopher and astrologer Elias Ashmole during the early 1650s. Ashmole wanted to join the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. In fact, there were no fratres RC anywhere. But for nearly a decade after the printing of the Fama Fraternitatis by Wilhelm Wessel in 1614, a battle of the books convinced thousands of European scholars and pundits that there were. Flames of interest and excitement were further fanned by the appearance of the Fama's follow-up, the Confessio Fraternitatis, the Confession of the Fraternity, in 1615. The following year saw the publication of The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, first composed by a 19-year-old Andreae in 1605. This hermetic novel, published anonymously, was taken as yet another manifesto from the mysterious Rosicrucian fraternity.
The impact of the publication of the Rosicrucian manifestos was the effect of dropping a mystery into the collective mind of an age. It's like dropping a pebble into a pool. The ripples go on, and in this case the impact was so strong that the ripples are still going today. It was, in fact, one of the most brilliant publicity stunts of all time.
For Europe is with child, and will bring forth a strong child. There shall be a door open to Europe when the wall is removed, which already doth begin to appear, and with great desire is expected of many. What before times hath been seen, heard, and smelt, now finally shall be spoken and uttered forth, when the world shall awake out of her heavy and drowsy sleep, and with an open heart, bare head and bare foot, shall merrily and joyfully meet the new arising sun.
The Rosicrucians believed that if you wanted to launch a new age, the best way to do it was to cloak your vision in a legend, a myth, and then to wrap it up in mystery, because a mystery is one of the most effective ways of getting hold of people's attention. We don't know for certain who wrote the Rosicrucian manifestos, but we do know the milieu from which they came, which was a group of people in Tübingen in Germany, surrounding the great Protestant theologian Johann Valentin Andreae. The time we're talking about is the early 17th century, and this group of people looked around them and they decided that what Europe needed was a kind of New Age movement. They had what we would now call a holistic vision, a way of looking at the world that brought together philosophy, science, art, and religion into one unified whole. And they believed that when people began to apply this vision, that a new age would be ushered in.
French philosopher Marin Mersenne got locked into a paper fight over the Rosicrucian Brotherhood with England's Dr. Robert Flood, as dozens of bound tomes and hurried pamphlets flew across Europe for the next 7 years. Some begged admittance to the Fratres RC. Some claimed to know who the Fratres RC were. Others claimed spurious membership. Everyone with an interest in the fraternity, whether for or against, and sometimes both, had their say. Johann Arndt, Count Michael Meyer, Matthias Berniger, Wilhelm Biedenbach, Benedikt Biedemann, Christoph Bismarck, Johann Bringer, Julianus de Campis, Johann Kombach, Johann Faulhaber, François Garras, Friedrich Grieg, Samuel Hafenreffer, Anna Hoyes, Philipp Geiger, Isaac Habrecht, Matthias Höy, Paul Lautensack, Andreas Libavius, Heinrich Nollius, Daniel Mögling, Esaias Stiefel, Gabriel Naudet, Jörg Rost, Paul Nagel, Olive Worm, Philipp Ziegler, Julius Sperber, Johannes Boreas, Daniel Sennert, Joachim Morsius, Johannes Walch, Simpert Wehr, Nicholas Honnius, Wilhelm Schickhardt, Paul Felgenhauer, Wolfhard Spangenberg, Abraham Kulstetus. Where some found rare allegorical meaning, others were shocked to reveal the world's first-blown multinational conspiracy story.
Many people were excited by the manifestos and attempted to contact the Rosicrucians. Other people wrote attacking them. Others, in fact, claimed to represent the Brotherhood. The reason why they left no mailing address was, I think, deliberate. What they were saying was, you will have to create this new age for yourselves. We're not going to do it for you. It's a process of inner transformation. And that also is a Gnostic idea.
The stakes could be high for pro-Rosicrucians who were too conspicuous. The printer Wessel's nephew, Philipp Hormagius, was tried here by Marburg University in 1620 and incarcerated in a distant castle for his intemperate love of things Rosicrucian. But there was neither faggot nor fire for the Rosicrucians themselves. The otherworldly Fratres RC were nowhere to be seen. Ah, thought their enemies, then the infernal brethren must be invisible. In 1620, the 30 Years' War was unleashed on Central Europe, a fight to the death between the Catholic South and the Protestant North. Catholic propagandists accused their enemies of being possessed by Rosicrucian witches. French philosopher René Descartes, who had gone searching for the Fratres RC, was himself accused in Catholic Paris of being a Rosicrucian. "How could this be?" responded the founder of the mechanistic philosophy. "All the world knows. They are invisible." Even before the war, in the comparative safety of Lutheran Tübingen, Andreae and his friends came under scrutiny. Caspar Bucher, professor of oratory, smelled subversion. In a sense, the bellicose Bucher was right. Andreae's amazing satire Menipus, published anonymously in 1617, revealed his political acuity. One of its themes was taken from the Paradoxa of Sebastian Frank, and could have been written for Bucher. The learned are perverted. Menipus, named after the cynic philosopher famous for his bitter sarcasm, advocated the full confessional freedom denied by Lutherans, Catholics, and Calvinists. Scanning the Lutheran states of 1617, 100 years after Luther's first famous defiance, Andreae heard an uncritical glee, hoarse with self-congratulation, wallowing in a centenary of freedom. Andreae, himself a Lutheran deacon, declared the excitement of fraud. The true Reformation had hardly even begun. Luther had condemned anyone who didn't agree with him. His followers persecuted those who read Frank, Schwenkfeld, Feigl, and the religious works of Paracelsus, not to mention the pro-Rosicrucians, whose only wish was for a universal science and education within a loving Christian society. Bucher called Menipus an alchemical abortion. Everyone knows, Bucher wrote in his Anti-Menipus, this Menipus comes from the circle which used to gather about Tobias Hess. Andreae's friend Hess, dead 3 years, could not reply. Menipus was suppressed in Tübingen. Andreae tried another tack. His Invitatio Fraternitatis Christi invited his readers to join the Fraternity of Christ, undoubtedly an invisible society, since virtually no one could recognize its existence. Andreae warned that the alchemical goal of true Christian discipleship was the practice of sacred love. Very few grasped Andreae's proffered hand, preferring the fantastical Fratres RC with their promise of more gold than both the Indies bring to the King of Spain, to the disciplines of alchemical soul cleansing. Andreae dubbed the gamut of mystery-mongers, chiliasts, neometrists, astro-calendar and gold-makers, self-styled initiates, occult obscurantists, apocalyptic new prophets, the little Curiosity brothers, or simply the Curiosi, who obscure rather than reveal the simple truth. In his brilliant playlet Institutio Magica pro Curiosis, he contrasted the hard-working Christianus with the get-occult enlightenment quick enthusiast Curiosus. In such hands, Andreae doubted if his Fama could accomplish mighty works. This is Comenius, an exception to the rule. In spite of youthful disappointment at the failure of the Fratres RC to declare themselves, this great Czech, born in 1592, the founder of the concept of universal education, said of Andreae, "He has given us the torch." Following in nature's footsteps, Comenius's hope in what he called the way of light would go on to inspire lasting educational and social reform in England, Sweden, and Holland. To minds that were already expansive, the Fama opened them still further, revealing an unclaimed empire of mind in nature and mind over matter. In 1960, historian Hugh Trevor Roper singled out Comenius together with the Pole Samuel Hartlib and the Scot John Dury as the real philosophers and the only philosophers of the English Revolution. Their spirit and work and the persistent image of the Fratres RC supported the foundation in 1661 of the Royal Society, patronized by Charles II. The Royal Society was an epoch-marking event in the history of knowledge. Andreae, who had died 7 years earlier in 1654, would have enjoyed the Society's open-minded, frank, non-ideological and above all practical approach to following in the footsteps of nature. He would have regretted the growing tendency to materialism. Nevertheless, a Rosicrucian enlightenment, the term is Francis Yates, really had occurred. We have Johann Valentin Andreae to thank for that.
El movimiento Rosacruz era indudablemente un movimiento gnóstico.
The Rosicrucian movement was undoubtedly a Gnostic movement. However, if any of the authors of the Rosicrucian manifestos had been asked if he considered himself a Gnostic, he would have immediately answered that he did not. At that time, the image that people had of Gnostics was practically handed to them by the writings of the opposing side, the one-sided writings of the Fathers of the Church, who had fought Gnostics from the first centuries of Christianity. However, within the Rosicrucian manifestos, there can be found many elements of traditional gnosis, so that the manifestos can be considered a kind of ring in the chain of tradition, which goes from Valentinian gnosis, the gnosis of the 2nd and 3rd centuries after Christ, passing through the Cathars, passing through the alchemists of the Middle Ages, passing through the mysticism of the Middle Ages, the Neoplatonic and Renaissance movement, and, above all, passing through Paracelsus, who, at least in the linguistic field, where the manifestos of the Rosicrucians were born, had given the symbols a new terminology, had given the symbols a new language of traditional gnosis. Therefore, it is not surprising that precisely the man who for the first time in the history of Christianity rehabilitated the Gnostics as one of so many branches of primitive Christianity was Abraham von Frankenberg, a disciple of Jakob Böhme and also an admirer of the Rosicrucian movement. He achieved this in a work in manuscript form in 1627, where, in a piece of writing entitled Theophrastia Valentiniana, he established the identity of the philosophy of Paracelsus, and Jakob Böhme with the theosophy, or philotheosophy as he calls it, of the first Valentinian movement, that is to say, the Gnostics.
Filoteosofía la llama él del primer movimiento valentiniano, es decir, de los gnósticos.
This work remained for the time being a manuscript, but it was published 100 years later in one of the historic works, which is a landmark in the historiography of the heretics.
Dentro de la historia de la historiografía de los herejes. Esta historia es la
This history is the history of heretics and churches by Gottfried Arnold, whose first edition appeared in Frankfurt in 1700. Two aspects of Frankenberg's book are curious. In the first place, the identification of Paracelsian Rosicrucian theosophy of Jakob Böhme with Gnosis, and not only these are named in the book. There is also a quotation from Giordano Bruno, reference to Meister Eckhart, reference to Tauler, and above all, and this is important, the Rosicrucian Brotherhood is mentioned twice.
Andreae had begun the process with a joke. The fame of the fraternity was of course nothing of the kind. Those who seek truth for truth's sake are generally invisible to the blind eyes of the world, is how Andreae and his friends would have seen the matter. In his untrumpeted collection of observations and dramatic pieces, Christian Mythologies, published in 1619, Andreae hoped to bring the curtain down on the Rosicrucian furor by turning the joke on its head. Andreae envisions a scene where a number of his contemporaries, following certain indices, go in search of and eventually discover a secret vault. In an almost sick parody of the Fama, the explorers break down a wall. Torches in hand, they enter the darkness. There they discover a sarcophagus with an inscription upon it, Mea Tempora, my times. With great difficulty, they heave the tomb open. The contents of my times are shocking. Inside the sarcophagus lies a cadaver. Unlike the pure flesh of Christian Rosicrucians, this body is horribly mutilated, the flesh consumed. After great effort, they succeed in uncovering a beautiful bronze plaque by the cadaver's rotting head. I, the truth, daughter of God, assassinated by the duplicity of Satan, by the corruption of the world, by the feebleness of the flesh, by the despotism of tyranny, by the indolence of the priests, by the malignity of politics, by the superficiality of historians, by the folly of the wise, by the stupidity of the people. I rest here within the mud of the lie. In 100 years, the sun will see me again. Greetings, O posterity. This is the tomb of truth. In a startling image, Andreae has succeeded in condensing his entire outlook and the real substance of the Fama as well. It is perhaps a sign of the perversity of the world that while his Rosicrucian fantasy is remembered, this devastatingly truthful work lies rotting in obscure libraries. The truth is assassinated. Alas, Britannia was unaware of all this. Her greatest Rosicrucian advocate, the prolific author and Paracelsian doctor Robert Flood, beginning in 1616, was always an outsider. This position would characterize British Rosicrucianism even up to the time of the studies of Dame Frances Yates in the 1970s. Historian Frances Yates advocated the now redundant view that the movement had its origins in the alchemico-spiritual adventures of the great John Dee. In the 1580s, Dee, accompanied by alchemist and clairvoyant Edward Kelly, had travelled to Poland and Bohemia with a message of angelically guided apocalyptic reform. Yates's hypothesis, together with that linking the genesis of the Fama to the political dreams of Frederick of the Palatinate, seen here with his British wife the Princess Elizabeth, in her book The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, published in 1972, has been exploded. The Rosicrucian movement was bred in Germany, albeit for export. the fraternity that turned up in England was a conception almost totally severed from its authentic politico-religious context. In spite, or perhaps because of this, its mystique proved no less fecund, however mutely its trumpets sounded. Rosicrucian ideals and images were part of the intellectual furniture of advanced mid-17th century philosophical, literary and spiritual life. If you were concerned with science, you knew about the Rosicrucian fraternity, or thought you did. When Comenius dedicated his Via Lucis, the Way of Light, to the Illuminati, as he called them, of the Royal Society in 1668, he was fully aware of its debt to the farmer's inspiration. There is another institution which may owe a similar debt. The genesis of accepted or symbolic Freemasonry has also been linked to the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. In an issue of the London Magazine of 1824, Thomas de Quincey, the opium eater, concluded from his studies of the German historian Bull that Rosicrucianism gave life to speculative Freemasonry. Dr. Robert Flood, with his copious continental contacts, was named as the progenitor of a transformation accomplished between 1630 and 1640. While it is true that two of the most notable accepted Masons of the 17th century were both enthused by the Fratres RC, namely Elias Ashmole and Sir Robert Murray, initiated in 1641, and whose seal you see here, and while both men were founder members of the Royal Society, Sir Robert Murray was its president, there simply isn't sufficient 17th century Masonic evidence to warrant de Quincey's definitive conclusion. The mythology of Rosicrucianism refused to die. In the 18th century, Rosicrucianism, or Neo-Rosicrucianism, now linked directly to alchemy and the great movement of Christian pietism, spawned actual orders, such as the Germanic Gold- and Rosenkreuz, claiming derivation from the original, and we know non-existent, fraternity. These movements were generally pursued within the context of continental and American Freemasonry. The descendants of the Neo-Rosicrucian stream continue vigorously to this day. For example, Amorc, the ancient mystical order Rosicrucians, founded by H. Spencer Lewis in the last century in America and based in California. The various offshoots of the late 19th century and originally Masonic Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The controversial Ordo Templi Orientis and its Hierophant Aleister Crowley. The followers of Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy movement. The Masonic Supreme Council of the ancient and accepted Right 18th degree Rose-Croix. The Dutch-based Lectorium Rosicrucianum offers a neo-Gnostic Rosicrucian initiation and enlightenment program for all the family. Whatever the intrinsic interest of these movements, it is true to say that any claims, implied or otherwise, to be derived from the Fratres RC are groundless. Andreae and his friends never wished to see their conception devolve into some kind of esoteric sect, sub-club, or assemblée of éminence grise, behind, above, or before any exclusive society whatever. To all that would listen, they said, "Do the spiritual work, that is, the ergon, and God will reveal his natural secrets, called the paragon or byproduct, to those who seek." The vault of the adept is, it seems, open to all that see it. The problem of the world's endemic spiritual blindness is no less a problem to us than it was for the true godfather of Rosicrucianism, Philip Theophrastus von Hohenheim, that is to say, Paracelsus.
I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind. The images are manifest to man, but the light in them remains concealed in the image of the light of the Father. He will become manifest, but his image will remain concealed by his light.
Also, our building, although 100,000 people had very near seen and beheld the same, shall forever remain untouched, undestroyed, and hidden to the wicked world.